Welcome to the Polandball Podcast. My name's Vorsy, your resident host and/or Australian, and today I'm joined by ChickenScuttleMonkey, who is one of my favourite artists of Polandball history. CSM, how you going?
That is such a nice thing to say. Yeah, I am ChickenScuttleMonkey, also known as CSM. Some of you may have heard of me, or at least seen, and if you don't know it's me, I'm the World at War guy. That long serial that you've probably seen somewhere.
Yeah, so CSM, you've probably seen his comics even if you haven't heard the name. He's responsible behind World at War, which is one of the longest running, most built out serials definitely in Reddit Polandball history. Can you talk a little bit more about the series?
Yeah, so kind of a literature history nerd that I am, when I discovered Polandball as a medium and as just a storytelling avenue, I saw an opportunity, I'll call it an opportunity. I saw an opportunity to reimagine probably one of the most well-known conflicts in world history as something of this dramatic soap opera style story. So even from the very beginning, I was imagining the Cold War conflict while I was still drawing some of the chapters for World War I. But just from the very beginning, I was hoping for it to be this like really sprawling, just like almost like a weekly soap opera kind of thing. It obviously took me way longer to finish than I ever anticipated it to, and it only got finished.
How many comics did it end up being?
Total chapters, I think, like I have the official number somewhere, but it's like 40 something. I went back and counted the number of panels one time, and it was easily like 150 to 200 something panels, and that's including some of the ones that Hinadira actually helped me on. So for those of you who, and I posted it into the comments, but I stalled out halfway through the Cold War series. It's life, ADHD, all sorts of other things. And it went unfinished for a handful of years until about 2019 or so. Hinadira, another great artist, reached out and was like, hey, I was wondering if you had any leftover scripts or plans for finishing the serial, because I'd be more than willing to help out with that. And I was like, this is such an honor. So I sent her over.
Yeah, because Hinadira as well, for those who don't know, I think another legendary name in the Polandball community, easily one of the top artists of all time. So it was when I saw the connect happen as a fan, like I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, so just those of you who may not know the username Hinadira, you absolutely have probably seen The Greatest Enemy, one of the greatest Polandball comics of all time.
Yeah, I think that could arguably take the claim for the number one. Big call, but I feel as if that could be number one.
It's such a good like I remember when that comic got posted and just like hit the top, and then everybody was like, whoa, where did this come from? And then eventually Hinadira became public and was like, I'm the artist, and then proceeded to just put out a ton of great comics. But yeah, so when she reached out to me about finishing this series, I was like, absolutely. So I just sent her over some of the scripts, and she took those vague ideas I had and then injected it with her own. I mean, so she's Polish, so she has a much better perspective on some of that Soviet West Germany Poland dynamic than I did. And so kind of seeing how she took my sort of narrative direction and then added like just a real authenticity to that. I don't think it would have been.
I think that's a really good point, actually. That's worth touching on. Is that very fitting for a Cold War thing to have an American and a Pole working on it? But I think that's also relevant to what we want to talk about today, about how international the Polandball community is and how those sort of collaborations between people from all over the world happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the first things that struck me about Polandball as a community, obviously, you may or may not hear the dog drinking water in the background. Obviously, Reddit being an American website dominated largely by American users, our Polandball as a subreddit is way more international. Arguably a larger percentage of non-American users on our Polandball than American users.
It'd be an interesting split. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yeah, as you said, Reddit's an American website, and I think if you write things in the English language on the internet, invariably you're going to have a big American audience. But something that is very unique about the r/Polandball community, the Reddit community, as well as the broader countryball community, is that it is really cosmopolitan, and I think that's a big part of the appeal.
Oh, absolutely. And so with that comes it's like you're browsing comics from those different perspectives. You're interacting with people from all over the world, and then of course, if and when collaborations come along, chances are you're going to be working with somebody with a very different background. And it's not just like here in the States, it's pretty standard that someone growing up in Texas is going to have a very different perspective than someone growing up in California. But even those two perspectives are much more similar than someone from Texas collaborating with someone from Poland. Very wildly different perspectives on the world, on world events, on cultures, and the way countries like people from different countries interact. It's amazing.
So let's talk on that actually, because I think that's part of it, right? What was your journey in sort of getting involved with the community, and how has that sort of international nature of Polar Ball opened your perspective to other countries? Let's dig into that.
Yeah, so my journey with Poland Ball starts in early 2013 with a cross post to R Funny. I'd been on Reddit for maybe a couple, like, I started my Reddit account December 2012, and I had been on for like maybe a couple of months by that point. Someone cross posted one of Kolai's comics, another great artist. But they cross posted one of his comics to R Funny back when that was still illegal. And I remember seeing that and thinking, this is great. Where can I find more of this? And I must have managed to catch one or two comments, like redirecting to our Poland Ball. And so I was like, great, let's. So hopped over to the subreddit and easily sunk maybe an hour or two just reading all of the various comics. Some very similar to the one that I had just seen on R Funny, but many very different ones from so like not just American comic creators, but I think Dick Rhino was just beginning his reign of terror, as it were.
I was going to say his full frontal assault in the American heartland.
Oh, yeah. Like, he may have been still in the middle of his the Fort of Augsburg series. I don't know how to pronounce that, but like either in the middle of that or like just after his first contest win or something. Just discovering the subreddit with like a really interesting culture and a really like internal culture, like especially back in the days when I think the subscriber count was like less than 12K at that point. And when you have a subreddit that small, you can really develop a culture, and not just the various cultures that are interacting there, but like a very unique our Poland Ball. Like, this is what we do here. We make these comics that make fun of countries and people from those countries. Discovering this subreddit as an American, but particularly a Texan, and we kind of, those of you who aren't from Texas or familiar with our egos, we kind of make a distinction here between our Texanness versus our Americanness. And so as a Texan stumbling onto this community, these comics that where America is kind of one of the butts of jokes, along with other countries, it was very easy for me to look past America being made fun of and just kind of get the vibe of like, okay, everybody gets picked on here. And it was just a lot of fun, and I had to contribute my voice to that conversation going on. So I think it was May 2013 when I finally submitted my first approval request.
Gosh, it's over a decade. Hey, like it's. I think, let's focus in on that, because I think there's an interesting distinction there about the whole Texas versus America thing and sort of interrogating one's own identity. Because and I think we've talked about this before, but I think as much as Poland Ball makes fun of every country, no cow is sacred. I think the reality is that there are two countries that are made fun of more than any other, and that's Poland, sort of by virtue of the name, but then it's America.
Yeah.
I think particularly on Reddit, where it is still a big American audience, and I think the reality is that it's very easy to get Americans' butt hurt, so it's fun to poke that.
Well, it's so
But like,
easy. I was just gonna say it's so easy to get Americans' butt hurt. There was this great pyramid comic that started the whole Dr. Osterreich's butt hurt ointment joke. Um, now
a classic of the genre.
it's so like it was like so on the line meta that like it was barely passed by the mods, I think. I'm a mod, but it was like just under the line of what would have been acceptable as not a meta joke. But I mean, it's arguably one of the most referred to gags now.
Because it's one of those things where, like, obviously, as an Australian, I think it's actually funny. My bugbear with Polandball is that Australia doesn't get featured enough, and I think that's mostly because people don't like drawing the Australian flag. Admittedly, it's an annoying flag to draw, but like, obviously, Australia gets made fun of, and there's plenty to make fun of with Australia. But I think, I don't know, maybe being an American, there you do have to necessarily develop a thicker skin, and I mean, how do you feel about it? I mean, that's the other thing, just as a segue. Like, it's interesting, the whole statehood thing, because obviously Texas, I think, is a particularly unique case. But, like, I think people who aren't American don't really see Americans as being from their states. They're just American, right? Like, I always find it funny when I meet Americans, particularly overseas, and people go, "Oh, where do you come from?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm from Germany, or I'm from China," and then it's like, "I'm from North Carolina," and people are like, I don't fucking know where that is. Like, you're an American. So,
Yeah, no,
but yeah, like, let's unpack the whole statehood thing, because I think that's an important discussion.
well, to that point, I would say arguably Texans are the worst about that. Like on average, like you can kind of tell an American just based on how we act outside of our country. And there is this sort of like statehood allegiance, um, but for the most part, you're going to see it more in Texas. Um, so, I mean, that comes with the whole territory of being our own country for 9, 10 years or whatever. Let's not forget the fact that we had a lot of debt, but like we'll move on past that. But typically in Texas, particularly, our identity or our sort of like national, with generous air quotes, identity is Texan first, and then like we'll concede to being American, but for the most part, you'll hear us say we're Texans first.
Because it's interesting, you get that with some other countries. When I'm also thinking about both members of the community as well as sort of your stock characters in Poland Ball, the Quebecois, Quebec is
Oh,
very different to Canada, and you see both those characters in comics, or maybe to a lesser extent, like Corsicans or Bavarians, or you don't really see it with Australia. Like, I think people don't really give a shit about Australian states, and they're even worse flags to draw. But I think it is a funny one. Like, I mean, Texas appears a lot in comics because I think Texas is just that America on acid character that's quite useful from an artistic perspective.
yes, it's an easy flag to draw for one, but two, I think I've felt this way for a while, probably for the past decade now. Texas is kind of the America of America.
Yeah,
So, like most of what the international community, like most of the gripes the international community would have about Americans, most Americans have about Texans. So the gun culture, for one. There's no one more gun loving than a Texan, stereotypically speaking. Or, I mean, just like the huge cars, the loudness, the very like prideful attitude, like a lot of that is pretty uniquely Texan. So it's just it is a fascinating dynamic to navigate.
I think from my perspective, you could probably America only needs four states, right? You have California, Texas, New York, and Canada, and then you're done. You only need four.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've talked with Aaron C14 plenty of times about just this sort of Canadian fascination with America, and this sort of American kind of ambivalence toward Canada, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and you have the same dynamic with Australia and New Zealand. But yeah, also, can we talk about the fact that there's so many Canadians in Poland ball,
There are a
like
lot of Canadians.
disproportionately represented?
Like I don't know what that. Maybe it's just by virtue of being in American time zones, like being so close to the states. I think Canada does get kind of overlooked in the U.S. But I mean, even that joke about them being like the fourth American state, yeah, it is kind of a weird statistic when you think about how many Canadians there are in Poland ball, but it's also kind of not surprising.
But also, I think if you're thinking about some of the great artists, like obviously Aaron, Legit Privilege,
Hmm.
Willed Oscar, like some of the heaviest hitters are Canadians.
Oh yeah,
I think it is interesting to see what groups are sort of overrepresented in Poland ball. I mean, funnily enough, there's a huge number of Poles, right? But there's
yeah.
also a lot of a lot of Swedes, a lot of Germans. Obviously, it's quite a European community and art form, but even within that, there are some countries where there's just so many artists.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's like you don't have that many Italians, but you have heaps of Germans and you have heaps of French. I find that sort of demographic part of it quite interesting.
There were like a series of hard hitting Finns too for some reason. Like I mean, we talked a lot about event on the last episode, but sock Finn for a while too. Like just
Yeah,
two off the top of my head. Like, I mean, you think Finnish stereotypes, and you're like, really? They're Poland ball comic artists?
that's a steer. I think obviously there's a lot of Brits. I think that there have been a lot of really influential British artists, and the reason I bring up the UK is because I think if we're talking about how Poland ball's really international, I know for you and I, it's helped us reframe our perspectives on the world. I think it's interesting with the Brits because the Brits, they kind of consider themselves part of Europe. They kind of don't, and I've got a lot of British friends both on the internet and in real life, and like the shit that gets taught in British schools about the world and colonialism and stuff is pretty shocking. Like I had a colleague, and she was English, and she was talking. She's like, "Oh, I didn't realize how everyone hated the English until I moved to Australia." And I was like, "What do you mean? Like, of course everyone hates the English, but." I say as an Australian, as a colonizer, right? But I mean but that's a thing with Americans too, right? Like the stereotypical American view of the world and education or whatever. It
Yes.
the reality, and particularly when you're in the polar ball sphere, like it's very different, right?
Well, absolutely. So, on that note, so coming to Poland ball as a Texan, again, like making that distinction, like rewind to 2013 for a bit. Like when I'm seeing these comics that are making fun of America and kind of getting this whole like, oh, this is how Americans are seen outside of our country. And of course, I'm taking this all in stride as a Texan because obviously we are exempt. But that also got me thinking in terms of wait a second, if this is how the world sees us, then what if they're right? What if we are this way? And does that exempt me, even though I am from Texas? And then got me looking even more insular. Like, wait a second, is my state all it's cracked up to be? Maybe the way I like to phrase it sometimes is that I used to consider myself pretty like hardcore Republic of Texas, like we could secede and be okay still. We could be our own country again. Um, I was pretty unironic about that for a while, but then getting exposed to different perspectives, getting exposed to an international community that not only saw us differently, but like people that I could actually interact with and have conversations with, kind of radically altered my perspective. And I started thinking more, I guess, cosmopolitan, a little bit more open minded about my own state and my own country, and um, a more realistic perspective, I think, started to develop.
For sure. It's an interesting one because I don't know. As much as it's very fun to make fun of America, and by God, America deserves it, I think it is also there is an interesting dynamic in Poland ball where for Poles and Americans, and I think particularly Americans, because I think actually a lot of Poles have pretty good senses of humor about Poland. Yeah, I feel as if it's something that people from other countries can't ever really truly appreciate, is like how much extra shit Americans kind of necessarily have to go through to like be a part of the community. I mean, do you see it that way, or am I Amerisplaining?
No, I think that's totally accurate. Like the average American discovering Polandball has to develop a thick skin very quickly, or just move on and find a different meme. From about 2013 to 17, I think that chunk of time specifically, distinctly remember anytime a comic would feature America in even a remotely unflattering light, you'd have tons of people, Americans, in the comments being like, "That's not true!" Like, blah blah blah. How could you depict us this way? One comic that comes to mind is Dick Rhino's the Fat America Blob comic. The
The
pretty
trampoline one,
the trampoline one, just this
which
legend.
is like it's so low hanging fruit too. Like Fat America is it's
It's
I don't know, it's from a
incredibly
simpler age.
it's incredibly low hanging fruit, and I know like that comic. I think specifically he made to piss off the Americans, but just the simple fact that people swarmed into that comment section, it was just like it just kind of proved the point.
It proves the point. It's like I think the only group more butthurt than Americans are Indians.
Oh, absolutely,
Like, oh my god,
absolutely.
as a mod, like anytime there's any comic about India or Pakistan, particularly if it's about the crises between those two countries,
Yes.
they always have the worst comment section. Worse than Israel Palestine, worse than America,
Yeah.
worse than Ukraine Russia. It's India Pakistan.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've seen the mod queue. Like, it just that's what's funny about being a mod sometimes is you see these comments and you're like, do I leave this up for posterity so that other people can see just how butthurt this person was, or
I have to admit, I spent the last 48 to 72 hours having a deliberate like argument with a Pole because I'd removed his comic because he'd drawn Poland the wrong way round, and he's like, no,
oh,
but this is how the flag's actually supposed to be, and I just kept going. I was like, nah, you're wrong, and you know what? That will never not be funny.
oh, that's
like,
delightful. Oh.
like I'm the problem, I'm the problem. It's me.
But like that statement for a second, an Australian guy arguing with a Polish person. I mean, the simple fact that like,
About their flag.
yeah, about their flag, like that's not a conversation that you would have in really any other community. Like the simple fact that it is past 1 a.m. in Texas and what is it like 5 p.m. your time? The next,
Yeah,
like
5:15.
this kind of interaction, I think, is very rare outside of this community, but within this community, I've seen this just kind of the norm. Like the comment section's full of people from different countries, different perspectives, and seeing like a lot of people finding the same comic funny, but for different reasons. If that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. And I think there's something to be said about that being united through a love of satire and edgy humor. In some ways, it's kind of heartwarming. It's like at the end of the day, we all just like to make fun of each other, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like it was a conversation I was having with Aaron at one point about how he sometimes likes to look up things to make like specifically to find things to make fun of about other countries, or loves reading comics to get that perspective so then he can include those in his comics.
Well, straight up, I think for me, like personally, being involved with Polandball has absolutely helped my ability to roast non-Australians in real life. It's in that sense unbelievably valuable.
Oh
Aaron's
yeah.
a sicko, and that's why I think he's such a good artist. Is that he's but also I think as a Canadian, he's also more than happy to really rip into Canada. I think some of the most brutal anti-Canada comics made have been his work.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've absolutely seen that. But he's also not afraid to apply that same intensity to other countries as well. Kind of beautiful to see.
Well, I guess that's a question. What would be your advice to people who are, maybe they've been in Polandball for a while, they're trying to get into this community, get their head around this art? What advice would you give to people to stop being butthurt?
Oh, I think some advice to stop being butthurt. First of all, to acknowledge that it's internet meme. It's not supposed to be taken as gospel truth that this is how it is and this is what this person thinks of your country, or that it's a joke. First of all, second of all, I think any criticism of one's country or one's nationality or all this can also be any criticism can be an opportunity for self-reflection too. I know for me that was that was the path that I took coming into it. First of all, recognizing it's a joke, it's satire, it's all this stuff, and then on the back end thinking in terms of what if this might be a pointed, accurate criticism wrapped up in a joke. So I think specifically the Dr. Osterreich's Butthurt Ointment comic was very intentionally poking fun at that American butthurt attitude. But if you take it as a serious criticism for a moment, Americans acted at that point. Americans acted uniquely disenfranchised or made fun of, as if this was the worst thing you could do to an American. But then people in the comments would be like, chill out, we make fun of all countries here. No one country is.
And the worst thing you can do with an American is give them vegetables to eat. Now that's a war crime.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Got to be careful. But I think further to that, would there be specific advice you'd give to other Americans about how they'd involve, or even other Texans? As much as I want to make it about America and not Texas.
Oh yeah, I mean,
as an aside, I remember the first time I came across you. I remember you'd got your heckles up about something, and you start off the sentence as like, "First of all, fuck you, I'm Texan," which is so totally iconic.
It was right around the very first lesser known September.
For those who don't know, Lesser Known September is something that we've run on r/Polandball for many, many years, where during September we restrict what countries can appear in art. Really, it's to restrict the big players. So no America, no Germany, basically no big European players, no English-speaking countries. The idea being that those lesser-known countries, they don't always get to be a part of a comic, get the light of day.
So I mean, it's a beautiful thing to set that we've been celebrating now for what, 9 years, something like that.
Yeah, and it's been great for 9 years because you get to see comics from starring characters that you don't normally get to see. It's it's very healthy, and I think it really works. But anyway, continue.
So when that was first introduced, I remember sort of the attitude being particularly from Americans, what? We can't draw comics about our own country this month. This is outrageous. This is unjust, or whatever. I specifically was upset because I was in the middle of drawing that serial at the time, that World at War serial, and so Lesser Known September gutted half of my characters because it was the United States, it was the UK, it was France, Germany, all the big Western countries. There was this very personal thing that I felt. I don't know. It was weird to feel like I was lumped in with the butthurt Americans because I was different somehow. And so for me, that "fuck you, I'm Texan" comment it was coming out of this place of hold on a second, I'm not just this average butthurt American.
I'm a butthurt Texan.
I'm a butthurt Texan. No, absolutely. Also, just very, very unrelated side note, that being one of my first major interactions with Brain for Breakfast. So I've seen those comments again in times past, just scrolling through my profile, oh man, this was his baby. This Lesser Known September thing was like one of his brilliant initiatives. And again, like kind of seeing on the back end now, like the reason I think Polandball as a medium, as a just comics in general, is so international and so cosmopolitan, has a lot to do with featuring these lesser known countries every September. And obviously, the way countryballs, as a term, has spread across the internet to feature all of like everybody's country and like everybody's represented. A lot of that has to do with our Poland ball origins and those initiatives like Lesser Known September. But anyway, like
For sure.
I look back at that.
At some point, I'd love to get a Polish guest on the podcast and talk about,
Yes.
because we're talking today about what it's like being an American in Poland ball, but I think it's also worth talking about what's different being Polish in Poland ball, because at least with America, you're not completely erasing American identity, whereas at least with Poland ball, on some level, to make sort of the medium work, Poland is the sort of dumb everyman. And obviously there are comics that talk about sort of Polish culture and whatever. Like Poland's not completely erased, far from it, but I think it's a completely different character where Poland is this sort of blank canvas. So what does it mean to have your country relegated like that? Like if it was Australia ball and Australia is just that stand-in character, how does that change Poland ball? So I don't know. And then the evolution, sort of country balls becoming more popular. What does that say about Poland's role in it? I think that's a discussion worth having. But I think to take us back to the sort of the butthurt thing, when you had that whole fuck you I'm texting moment, was that sort of one of those moments of self reflection you were talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Or like, especially immediately afterward and in the years since. So like, when that happened, and I reacted the way I did, I felt myself, or I saw myself as not the average American. Like, obviously, I have been part of this community, like this wider Poland ball community for so long. Like, I'd been drawing a lot of comics by that point. I felt like I was somebody who got it and didn't get offended by anti-America jokes or like American butthurt jokes. And so when I had that reaction, I felt like my outrage was justified. But then in like probably like the next day, honestly, and in the following weeks and in the years, kind of looking back at that and still seeing the vestiges of somebody who hasn't quite moved past their American perspective to where now I look at that comment as being written by a completely different person almost.
Because I think it talks to a bit like it's something that we talk about a lot, I think, in sort of general political discourse about American exceptionalism. And I think that kind of informs the way Americans act online and see themselves and butthurt and whatever. But yeah, I think that's part of it, right? It's like, oh, well, we should be included because we're not like other countries. You should ban other countries, but not us. And, like to play devil's advocate, there's probably an argument to be made about it. Like, I think if we're going to go for maximum butthurt here, I think a lot of people who are into Polandball would not like to admit the fact that we live in a world where America is the hegemon, right? Like, it is the most important country in the world. There's no getting around that. If you don't like it, stiff. So I guess there could be an argument to be made there that what is Polandball without America?
No, I mean that's an argument to be made, but I think at the same time, a core component of Poland ball is that every country is a target.
For sure.
If America is being featured disproportionately, for example, then why still call it Poland ball? I think our adherence to that term kind of just comes from what 12 years of tradition at this point.
Yeah, but I also think it's worth recognizing that as well, that like this Polandball came from a German message board.
Yes.
And there is a reality that I think there is something uniquely European about Polandball. So yeah, I can see what you're saying, but I think the Polandball will always be a bit European, just sort of because that's where it came from.
Yeah, and so to your point about American exceptionalism too, like I think those of us who grow up in this country, Texan or not, those of us who grow up in the borders of the United States inherently kind of feel this American exceptionalism. And so when the international community responds to us the way that the international community responds to us, whether like for good or for ill. We react from this place of American exceptionalism. And so when you stumble across a subreddit where some of the comics happen to portray your country in a less than flattering light, that can be seen as a direct attack on this American exceptionalism. Like, wait a second, I thought everybody loved us. I thought we were above the jokes. And then come to find out, no, we're not at all. In fact, we are the butt of the joke.
So what would you say is the solution then to like an American sort of impolable? Is it that you need to swallow your pride? You need to recognize that America isn't as exceptional as you think? Or like how would you put it?
I mean, I think you put it perfectly. I think for a lot of us Americans, we need to swallow some of that pride a little bit. Understand that everybody gets made fun of here and makes fun of. Yeah, they're making fun of you now, but in order to get into the spirit of Polandball, maybe you make a comic about a German, and then that German will make a comic about an American, and then like it's just this mutual ribbing that occurs.
For sure. And I think maybe I'm getting too highfalutin, but I think part of it is well. I know when I was speaking with Dick Rhino last episode that the idea that pole and ball can be a force for good or whatever. Let's not drink our own Kool-Aid. But like, if your country's being made fun of for doing something, then maybe your country just needs to be better.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I mean, I say that. I mean, as we're recording this right now, it's referendum day here in Australia. We've got the referendum for a voice to Parliament for Indigenous peoples. I'm not going to get too political about it, but I think regardless of the outcome of this referendum, I think Australians, if there are Australians on Polandball looking at comics being made about Australia, we need to think, well, what's happening in our own backyard? Maybe we ought to be made fun of. And I think sometimes being made fun of can open your eyes to when your country's doing something bad or if your country's doing something weird.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, so for me, like kind of on that note, when I was working on the World at War serial, specifically that serial, and in order to like make the most accurate, to my knowledge, depiction of these relationships and whatnot, and all the research into history that I did, and like developing this really nuanced view of that early 20th century that in the United States just does not happen for the most part. Most of what we're taught growing up about that period is that we were the good guys. We saved Europe from itself, and we rebuilt them after the war was over with, and then we fought the commies for the next 70 years or whatever. That's kind of how it gets taught out here, but because I was engaging with this international community and trying to tell a story in a way that is accurate, or at least more nuanced, I was confronted with perspectives a little bit more unbiased. And I'm sure if you read back through those comics, you'll see the touch of Americanness that I can't help but insert into my comics because that's the perspective I have. And then you read the last 6 chapters of the Cold War serial where Hinadira came in and finished those, and you see a very different perspective. So as a Polish person, the way she depicted this relationship between the Soviet Union and East Germany and Poland was very different from how I was starting to. Even though we both kind of have this same perspective of, yeah, these were countries that were kind of closely knit, more so than Western countries were with Germany and Poland at the time, but just kind of the perspective she added to that was so different than what I had, and I don't even remember the original question at this point. But
well, I'm just thinking of the Norm Macdonald line where he goes, isn't it amazing? Throughout history, the good guys always won. How about that?
And I think that's, yes.
I'm probably misquoting that, but I mean, on that teaching thing, I mean, you'd be in a more interesting position than most when you talk about teaching, because that's your profession, right? Like you've gone on to, post a decade being in Polandball. That's your day to day.
Oh, absolutely, and it 100% impacts kind of how I talk about. So I'm an English teacher. Just this. Again, international perspective that I've gotten from drawing meme comics for 10 years has really changed the way I approach American history, American literature, and it's a very different experience in the classroom for my students than it would be had I just stayed in my very narrow Texas is the greatest state on God's good earth and nobody can convince me otherwise mindset.
Yeah, fair enough. And again, I think bring us sort of back round the circle. I feel as if that's what makes Polandball so special. It's that international nature and it's that ability to learn. I think most artists that I know, most community members I know, they'd all say the same thing. I know as an Australian, I've learnt a lot. We've talked a lot about America. I've learnt a lot about America from being involved with the Polandball community. In the same way that I've learned a lot about Argentina or Poland or the Czech Republic. Sorry, Czechia. Name changes. That's something else. I mean, most Aussies still call it the Czech Republic, but it's something that's not on the radar here politically. So I think there's so many little touch points where there's things I've learnt being part of the community where it's like pretty special. Maybe I'm waxing lyrical now.
No, I think you're hitting the nail on the head, and I think that's what has made this such an enduring meme format, if you want to reduce it to that. So unlike Rage comics, where you've got just the punchline to expect, I think y'all use that phrase. Like they said the thing, so we're supposed to laugh now. Because Polandball is an international format, and it's much more intricate and detailed dialogue and like you have to know about a country's stereotypes or how they're seen or what's a popular joke to make about a German. You have to learn these things if you're going to draw a good Polandball comic.
For sure.
On the topic of humor and how to do a good Polandball comic, like I'm sure that's a whole other podcast episode, but it's more.
Oh my god! I think that there's so much we could mine.
Yeah,
there.
like it's way more than just saying Germany work with like a pickaxe or something,
or indeed America bad,
or indeed America. Yeah, absolutely. Like it's easy to make that punchline, but what makes a good comic is that sort of nuanced perspective, like events. Again, like we talk about this guy a lot. The comic where
I need to track him down and put him on. Like we need to pull him out of retirement.
Yeah.
And put a mic in front of him.
God, that one comic of his where like Germany gets sentenced to vacation.
Oh, what a classic! Yeah.
Like that requires so much understanding of like the German work ethic and the German perspective, and to make a joke about how vacation is actually a punishment.
Yeah, and maybe that's a joke that can't be told by a German. In the same way that I'm sure there are jokes about Australians that I just will not be switched on to. I need that international community, someone else's eyes, to be able to tell that joke and to laugh at myself.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, if that's somewhere maybe that's where we wrap up on, is that the beauty of Polandball is that it's a bunch of people from around the world helping each other to laugh at each other. I think that's part of it.
And if you miss that opportunity to laugh at yourself, then you also miss the opportunity to laugh with somebody.
Indeed, and that's what it should be about the day is it's sharing laughs, because there's one thing that everyone likes around the world, it's having a laugh.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, look, CSM, thanks so much for joining me. Have you got anything to plug? What can we share with the audience?
So if I've got anything to plug, I guess follow me on Reddit. You'll see a link to my WordPress and like my CSM Instagram page. I'm trying to be better about uploading stuff. But I've done a lot of comics over the years. I've got the World at War and the Cold War serials. One of these days, I'm going to finish the Texas History serial. I just gotta convince myself to have the energy to draw all those backgrounds. But yeah, yeah, follow me on Reddit. You'll see those comics as they get posted.
And for those of you who are still sort of discovering the Reddit Polandball community, I really think CSM's serials are sort of required reading. You should definitely check them out, because particularly if you're an American who wants to learn more about America and America's role in the World Wars and the Cold War, I think there's few better places to start, really.
Thank you for that glowing recommendation.
Oh, look, that's what I'm here for, mate. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Polandball Podcast. We'll catch you next time. Take care. Thanks so much.
Bye, y'all.